Secretary General Kofi Annan has said the United Nations once dealt only with governments, but now we know that peace and prosperity cannot be achieved without partnerships involving governments, international organizations, the business community, and civil society. In today's world, we depend on each other. So this morning's plenary session is about alliances, unusual, creative, and bold alliances that go beyond traditional constituencies to reach and mobilize a broad spectrum of interests for common goals. I think we're going to address ourselves to two different categories here of where alliances come into play. One is for building support for development and creating demand for change, but also partnerships for actually doing the work, which a couple of my panelists have experience with. I guess I'd like to put an idea on the table, a hypothesis, and maybe the panelists can comment on it, but it seems to me that partnerships have made possible a number of probably surprising but very positive developments over the last 10 years or so in terms of progress against debt relief, the President's AIDS initiative, the Millennium Challenge Account, the G8's focus on Africa, the Millennium Development Goals, the creation of the Global Fund for AIDS, TB, and malaria. I think all of these things are probably a little bit surprising, or the trend is maybe a little bit surprising for those in the development field, and I think there are a number of factors at play, but that clearly partnerships have played a major role. I think the factors probably include the HIV/AIDS crisis, terrorism, and 9/11 and the response to that, the rise of faith-based organizations, and in general, globalization factors, the sort of shrinking of the world that we live in. But I think it's clear that some of the unusual coalitions and partnerships have played a major role in some of the positive developments that we've seen over the last decade or so. One entity that has been in the middle of a lot of these alliances and brokered a number of them is an organization called DATA, Debt, AIDS, Trade, Africa. And Ed Scott, our first speaker, is one of the founding board members of DATA. He also is the benefactor and creator of the Center for Global Development, which is a think tank that focuses on development here in Washington, that in a very short period of time has become a leading force in thinking about development. He's also creator of the Friends of the Global Fight, and before all this, Ed was a very successful businessman, but he's a powerful advocate and funder of development issues, and Ed's going to talk a lot about his philanthropic approach and reaching across ideological and political divides. After Ed, Jamie Drummond, who is the executive director of DATA, and by the way, Ed and I have both worked with Jamie closely as board members of DATA, is going to, and by the way, Jamie also was very involved in one of the early, I think, examples of unusual alliances, and that's Jubilee 2000, the Drop the Debt campaign. And through DATA is sort of an architect of the One campaign, which is a clustering together of unusual partners to create support for development. And I think Jamie will have some interesting lessons for all of us about how to build alliances and how to incorporate that into philanthropic strategy. And last but not least, to my left is Wyclef Jean, a talented Grammy Award-winning musician and the founder of Yéle, Haiti, which is a very impressive nonprofit, young but impressive nonprofit organization that's meant to empower the people of Haiti and the broader Haitian diaspora to rebuild the nation. Yéle, Haiti combines the power of music with tools for development and focuses on education, health, environment, and humanitarian assistance. And also, just to anticipate, you can see to your right, for the most part, there's a stage set up. And not only, we're talking to Wyclef today as a philanthropist and an activist on behalf of development in Haiti, but what he's best known for, of course, is being a hip-hop musician, and he's going to perform, I believe, around lunchtime, maybe after President Clinton. And we're very eager to hear from him, and he, in his own work, has had a fair amount of experience working with partners, both to generate a focus for Haiti, as well as taking some unusual approaches within Haiti to advance their work. So without further ado, I think we're just going to work our way this way and ask for each of the panelists to maybe talk for 10 minutes. I may have a couple questions, and then we'll turn to you for questions. So Ed, if you would mind.
Thank you, David. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm very impressed that such a large number of people would want to get up at 8:30 in the morning to talk about these issues, so you must be really committed. And so we're very pleased that we have a chance to talk to such an informed and committed group. I came to this world that we're all participating in one way or another through a couple of avenues. First, I was a U.S. government bureaucrat. Ended my government career as an assistant secretary at the U.S. DOT. Then I spent 18 years in business and had the good fortune to have an extremely successful company that resulted in my having some financial resources that would allow me to participate in the kinds of things we're involved in. Like a lot of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs who've had good fortune, after you sort of cashed in and you start to think about what am I going to do with the rest of my life, I think the impulse is to try and find discrete, worthy initiatives that you can fund and in a typical Silicon Valley way personally drive home and make successful and make sure they don't make any mistakes and be all over them the way we run a high-tech company. After you've done a couple of those, you realize it doesn't work that way. But I did, nevertheless, give it a shot. I was involved in creating an orphanage in Central America, which has been quite successful, has about 42 children in it now, and they're very happy and in much better circumstances than they were before that. And I also assisted an outfit called Compassion to open up their operations in a Central American country, and now there's something like 25,000 kids getting services from them. So in some respects, I took a shot at this direct, hands-on, push it up the mountain yourself approach. But it was clear to me that, it soon became very clear to me, and I know it's become clear to others, that you can't really change things in an overall global way with that approach, because none of us have enough money or time or energy or expertise to do that. And so the whole issue about building alliances becomes, a pretty obvious imperative. In an interesting way, Jamie, with his work at Jubilee, had quite an influence on me, because I was watching a film one night and saw this report on the whole third world debt issue and became convinced that that was something that really needed to be addressed. And so after doing a lot of research on the subject, I came to Washington and met with a bunch of experts, and ultimately was convinced that the really important thing that needed to be done was to form a research organization who could really examine in deep detail the components of the poverty question and what can and should be done about it, including debt. And in fact, the first thing the Center for Global Development did was write a book on where we stood on debt relief. It wasn't long after that I realized that both direct contact on the ground and involvement and research and policy analysis weren't enough. That, they're just a couple of elements of the thing, and that there was really something else required, and that's aggressive advocacy. And along the trail, I ended up meeting Bono and Bobby Shriver and Jamie, and they all were very, very persuasive. And so about 3.5 years ago, David Lane's boss and George Soros and I put some money in a pot and created this thing called Data, which has become a platform, first a platform for Bono to take his very effective message to the world, but in addition has spawned the One campaign, which I'll let Jamie tell you about, but which has been extraordinarily successful. And it's been a very, very important complement to what the rest of the development community does, because nobody takes that message forward more successfully than Bono. And the team at Data includes people here like Aaron Chapman, who does policy research and development for Data. You know, I was starting to get my plate reasonably full, and then I heard a speech by the person who's going to speak here a little later today, President Clinton, at Davos, along with Richard Feacham, the head of the Global Fund, talking about, this is about 3.5 years ago, about what a daunting issue the world was facing, trying to get its arms around the global AIDS crisis. And so I ended up collaborating with Richard to try to figure out. It became obvious to me that the only game in town was at that time was the Global Fund, and that the Global Fund was never going to be successful unless it had the support of the U.S. of A. That the population and the political establishment of the United States needed to support the Global Fund, or it was going nowhere. And it was also obvious to me that the Global Fund had no way to get its message out in the U.S. because it was in Geneva, had a very small, at that time somewhat inexperienced staff, was overwhelmed with the task it was trying to pursue, and it was clear that they needed some representation in Washington. And at first I proposed a grant to the fund so that they could do that, and they said, no, we're an international organization, we're going to stay right here in Geneva and do our thing. And so we said, okay, we'll do it for you. So we set up Friends of the Global Fight, which is more an educational clearinghouse, if you will, an information center and a center of friendly persuasion, which we got Jack Valenti to agree to run. Jack is kind of like the Bono of the political world. He was Lyndon Johnson's chief of staff. He ran the Motion Picture Association of America for 30-some years, and he has more Jews than any person I've ever met. And when he calls a member of the administration or someone on the Hill and asks whether he can have a couple of minutes of their time, they say, would 20 minutes from now be okay? I mean, it's quite extraordinary. And so that journey really made it very clear to me that this whole issue of global public health and global poverty is a question that really is going to require all of us to get in the boat with each other. And I think it's very much to the credit of the international community and the philanthropic community that more and more, and as a result of forums like this and other developments over the last 5 years, we've made tremendous progress, I think. I think the G8 success that Jamie will tell you about was an example of that. I think the President's emergency plan for AIDS relief has been a stunning success and has brought great credit on the United States and on all of us. It's a tremendous program, and it was very well led by Randall Tobias, who's now become the head of USAID, and perhaps will also become Deputy Secretary of State for Development, a job that the United States has never had before. So I think the influences, and now you're going to hear from President Clinton later about the things he's now been doing since he left the White House, and the extraordinary leadership he's shown in getting the drug companies, alliances with the drug companies, to get them to lower the cost of the antiretroviral drugs. And so I think the whole question of how you build bridges and how you build alliances is becoming better and better understood, and a lot of it's going on quite effectively. I'd like to end my remarks by just telling you about one such project. You know, in Africa, something like almost 50%, 40-some% of all the health care is delivered by faith-based organizations, and yet the money which has been given out by the Global Fund is only about 4% goes to faith-based organizations, and PEPFAR has given a large grant to Catholic Relief Services and taken a huge amount of heat for it, which is ridiculous. But in any event, there's just no doubt that these faith-based groups know how to get the job done and are doing an extraordinary job. And in recognition of that, I hooked up with this outfit called Compassion that I mentioned to you before, and gave them a grant for them to examine and implement a program to give ARVs to their children. I might go over 30 seconds, bear with me. So Compassion is an organization that does the sponsorship model like World Vision and Save the Children, you know, $30 a month, and you sponsor a child and they get child development services. They provide those to about 800,000 kids in 23 countries. But in Africa, in East Africa, where the AIDS pandemic is pretty much out of control, they have about 204,000 kids under their care. And as a result of this incentive that they were provided, they decided they would go to their base and ask for money, an additional increment of money each month, so that they could provide testing and treatment services to their children who might be HIV positive. So they set out to test these kids, and in the first year, they've tested about 27,000 of their own kids and 38,000 of the caregivers and siblings of their kids, because it would be incredibly immoral to test one child in a family and leave the grandparents or the parents or the aunt and the uncle that's taking care of the children, or the brothers and sisters, without treatment. They've tested 38,000, and they now have on ARVs over 1,200 kids in this period of time. And it's all being paid for by the donors of these children. And there's no doubt in my mind that within the next year, they will have done 100% of the children and caregivers that they support in Africa. So it's, you know, there's a lot of capacity out there, and there's a lot of knowledge and ability out there. And I think those of us who are think we're engaged in philanthropy or in some other way are trying to change the way the world goes about its business, just can never forget how effective it is to make use of those resources and how those people can really get the job for us, done for us, and it's just tremendous leverage. So you get leverage, I think, by you get results by direct action, you get results by leverage with people who are examining and researching the issues, you get leverage by effective advocacy through people like data, or by effective representation, people like Friends, or by collaboration with delivery capacities like Compassion. So it's a broad-gauged approach, and I think if you think about it that way, you can be reasonably successful. Thank you.
Ed, those were terrific insights across a really broad range of issues, and I think it sets the stage nicely for Jamie. Go on, Jamie.
Thanks, David and Ed. And this, in some ways, feels very much like a data morning. Apologies. It's a nice reunion of old friends here. I think I saw Gail Smith in the back there, and Trevor Nielsen and Adam Waldman. There's Erin over there, Erin Thornton, our policy director. And of course, David and Ed, founding board members for data. And Clef, we worked together on the Jubilee debt cancellation, which many of you know, that got a big result back in 2000, 2001. And we just got another big result around the G8. And in fact, just last week, the World Bank and IDA are going to go to 100% debt cancellation. That's finally been passed by all the deputies. So the progress goes on debt. But so there's been a lot of, rather than give the sort of background and genealogy to data and who we are and how we came together and the lessons that might come from that, I'd just like to sort of, if you don't mind my being a bit Irish, start at the end, which is to say there's two things I think that are really, really important, which if we don't focus on, and we, I mean I think, all of you and the advocacy community and the non-profit community and policymakers. If we don't focus on these two things, we're going to screw things up really badly. The first is there needs to be a much bigger, better, stronger movement in America for global development issues than there is right now. There are some of the pieces in place, but they're not all together yet. They're not properly resourced. They're not properly financed. The most experienced people aren't being sucked into this area yet, though it's getting better. And it's holding up, actually, I think, the rest of the world in their push to achieve the Millennium Development Goals. So I implore you all to think about what you're doing in this area and what more we might all be doing in this area of building a bigger, better constituency in the United States for development issues. And I would like you very much to think about the One campaign, which is spun off from Data now. It's a different thing. It's an independent entity, and I'd like you very much to think and get in contact with its director, Paul Diagardi, and think about how you might get behind that campaign, because frankly, we need it to succeed. We need it to recruit a lot of Americans, to put pressure on their politicians, to increase foreign assistance, effective foreign assistance, and improve policy. And if it doesn't succeed, I think we've got quite a lot of problems ahead of us. That's my first thing for the morning. The second is we need to be really serious about making sure that increased foreign assistance, whether it's actually our own private charitable giving, or whether it's our government's giving from Europe or in the United States, to make sure that money is much better spent. Because we're leveraging billions and billions of dollars, major policy change, and we can do great, good things, or we can do potentially bad things if we don't get that right. So there's two very big challenges. One, build a bigger, better movement in the United States for these issues, which is totally doable, just needs to be done. And secondly, we need to invest, I would say, especially in Africa, in building up the systems of governance and transparency whereby we can ensure that foreign assistance into Africa is better spent. And that's not about us coming along with clipboards and keeping an eye on people. It's about supporting their systems to keep an eye on their governments and on us. So those are the two big things that I wanted to finish with. I thought I should get off my chest in case I somehow forgot. Data. We came together, as many people said, around debt cancellation and Jubilee and the call for debt cancellation around the year 2000. It actually was kind of, it sort of fell in our laps in a sense. It had that sense of inevitability that good ideas have. And it was an easy sell to Bono in some ways, though he was on tour at the time when I first made the pitch. It was irresistible. How could you not have something that could bring together the entertainment industry and the evangelical Christian community on the same page with development theorists? How is that possible? It's too fascinating not to take a bite into that and see what fun we could have. And the result was, $100 billion of nominal debt cancellation in the build-up to 2000. I'm short-changing the enormous amount of work done by a lot of people. Things like evangelical Christian community is shorthand for a whole different range of groups, not all evangelicals. And also, there's lots of different people in the entertainment industry who came together, from hip-hop and, to poodle-headed rock stars. It was an odd coalition of people who looked interesting in a photograph together. I think that was best epitomized with the meeting with the Pope when Bono gave him the fly shades and he put them on, and both of them demonstrated their genius for the photograph in that moment. His Holiness and Bono, because to give the fly shades to the Pope takes an act of bravery, perhaps. To put them on is a different category of thing. And that photograph was actually locked away in the vaults of the Vatican immediately afterwards. It was never shown the light of day. Various people faked it because they claimed they had an exclusive, but it didn't make the light of day until very quietly. Recently, Archbishop Dermot Martin from Dublin gave us the photograph, and we got it framed in the office. It encapsulates, I think, the subject of this morning's subject, really, which is unlikely coalitions, building alliances. Because, as Ed was saying, you know, often, for example, it's Catholic Relief Services who are doing much of the best work, and they're a third of healthcare infrastructure in Africa. They're also, the bishops in Africa are probably going to be at the forefront of anti-corruption drives and transparency drives. They're going to be at the forefront of these issues. They're often the only people who are in a position to challenge corrupt governments where they exist, and back good governments where they exist. They're the important, independent, strong voice in civil society in the United States, in Europe, and in Africa. And so we need to figure out how to work with them, and deciding not to work with them is really foolhardy and spiting ourselves. So I'm rambling a bit. I think just a couple of observations about data, what it is and what it isn't. It's supposed to be more of a kind of business-to-business brand, not the public front. Its name would suggest that we didn't harbor ambitions of being a populist thing in and of itself. We chose that name on purpose because it's a little bit green eye shady and boring, because one would anticipate and expect a rock star and celebrities maybe not to know all the facts. That's the prejudice people have, and it's great to surprise people and put the rock star and the hip hop star with the facts. In fact, better than the politician you're talking to, and that's what scares them most, is when the rock star and the pop star is better briefed than the politician. That makes them read their own briefings from their staff, which means that they might understand what they're talking about a bit better. I'm not saying, you know, this might just not be an issue that comes to the top of their inbox very often, not because they don't think it's important, but because their constituents are telling them lots of other things are important. And we need their constituents to be telling them that this is actually one of the most important issues, maybe the most important issue to all of us. So it's a bit about data. Another thing about data is we don't have investments on the ground in Africa. We don't have projects on the ground. We don't want to do that. We want to advocate that you give and that governments give their money to other effective mechanisms. The Global Fund for AIDS, TB, Malaria, the Millennium Challenge Account, if we could get that going a bit faster, that's something. The World Bank's Fast Track Initiative. We want money going into those sort of macro-level solutions to the big problems, such as getting education for all, treatment access for all. We need big solutions, and maybe that bring together the multilateral players, as well as sort of piloted, targeted investments that kind of blaze the path. David, am I rambling too much?
You're doing beautifully, but you probably want to start winding it up.
Okay. So we worked aggressively last year in the build-up to the G8 summit, saw that it was a real opportunity with people in Prime Minister Blair and Chancellor Gordon Brown who care disproportionately almost about these issues, and saw an opportunity to work with them to deliver a communique in the G8 Gleneagles communique that was unusually good on development issues and on global development. And it offered $50 billion more by 2010 for all developing countries, and $25 billion more by 2010, specifically for sub-Saharan Africa. And the engineering of that outcome was an enormous effort by a lot of people around the world. We at Data particularly work with a kind of a class of a policy maker that not many people know about, called Sherpa, the G8 Sherpa. And we sort of work behind the scenes with those kinds of players and their bosses, try and encourage pressure from the Japanese citizens, the German citizens, British citizens, Irish citizens even, and American citizens on their governments to improve what they're offering the world's poorest countries. I know a lot of you are probably thinking about advocacy investments. I would like to think that data shows that those kinds of investments can make a very big return if they are prepared to work with all the parties.
Right. Thank you, Jamie. Of course, Jamie addressed himself to advocacy and effective advocacy, which makes sense because Jamie is a very powerful advocate for a variety of causes, as you just heard. And you might expect that that's what Wyclef would now do, talk about advocacy, because he's a celebrity and a hip-hop star. But in fact, Yéle, Haiti, is doing a lot of work on the ground in Haiti. So even though he's lent his celebrity to advocacy efforts, as Jamie indicated earlier, he can talk to us about the role of alliances and actually getting the work done. And so without further ado.
Well, I like to first say that I am a hip-hop star, so I'm able to get away with wearing these big shades. Basically, I am a student of Bono. I would really say, coming from where I come from, when we started a foundation which is called Yéle, Haiti, I have been effective on the ground. I have lent myself, my safety. If anyone in the room knows anything about Haiti and reads the New York Times, there's a situation where the gangs in Haiti were following what the Iraqis were doing, where they were cutting off heads of children, of different people in the country. And I took it upon myself. I didn't tell my mother where I was going. I didn't tell my wife where I was going. But I felt that I landed in Haiti, took American Airline, I took coach, and no, I took first class. And, landed on the ground and took it upon myself to go into these communities and to speak with these gangs. What do we have in common with the gangs? I would say somehow our music reaches these communities. The reason why hip hop and rap is so powerful, because it's words that talk about the environment and the situation that's going on at the present moment. And after talking to the gangs, we felt that it was important to help every other foundation that was in Haiti, because people had problems getting the food into the slums. People had problems cleaning up the streets. And we felt that why start brand new when you have a bunch of people, a bunch of great minds doing what you're doing, and all you have to do is lend a hand. So what we have done through Yéle, Haiti is I have loaned my celebrity since 1994, basically, to basically help move the country forward. Now, a message to the donors. There's a lot of people that have given to Haiti and just fed up and say every time we try to give, we give, the government gets more and more corrupted. But I think through Yéle, Haiti, you have a unique situation which has worked, where we have physically been on the ground, where we're rebuilding schools, where believe in music, believe in sports. Education is the #1 priority in Yéle, Haiti. For example, you might look at me and say, he doesn't talk like a rapper. That's because I'm really a lawyer. So it's real important that everybody on the panel, great minds that, and everybody in the room know that Yéle, Haiti is a rookie in the game, but we can ball like Allen Iverson, meaning like we're young boys coming in, but we have a lot of energy in the sense of we can do a lot of the groundwork. So I urge everyone, as you're, going through your checkbooks and you're dropping them billions and billions and billions, just consider more development with Yéle, Haiti, because the more that we can align ourselves with the right partner, I feel that the more that we'll be able to move Haiti forward. Now, my philosophy is this. There's a lot of people in the world. You can't help everybody, but if you can grab just a few, then that's what's gonna move the human race forward. So as certain people concentrate on parts of Africa, which is very important, I took it upon myself to concentrate on the small island of Haiti for the rest of my life. And what I hope is that through partnerships, we can move education forward, development forward, micro enterprising forward, because I always tell people that what the Haitian people, anybody here ever been to Haiti before? Cool. I like that. Sac passe? Okay, your Creole sucks. Sac passe basically means how you doing, and you're supposed to say not boule. So obviously I need to give you guys a course. We'll do that in the music later. But it's very important and moving forward for you to understand you're dealing with the country that is still virgin. 88% of the population cannot read, cannot write. We want to be part of the debt movement because we feel that a country like Haiti, which is zero right now, should have all the debt raised because it's at zero. Like there's nowhere to go nowhere but to the top right now. So we took it upon ourselves. We have purchased television stations where we could work on bringing education, sports, and different programs. Now, every time I go to Haiti, I'm not going to lie to you, I'm not a billionaire, but I happen to be a multi-millionaire. But every time I go to Haiti, out of my pocket, hard cash, I'm spending over like $50,000 to $60,000 out of my pocket. So being that I'm not a billionaire, it kind of hurts me, you know? And as I started spending this money out of my pocket, the hard cash, I noticed something about the people. The people do not need money. That is not what they need. Micro enterprise is the way of the future through alliance. Meaning that if you find programs, she hit me with the 3 minutes. If you find programs that can empower the people, then the race can move forward. And that's basically what we're doing through Yéle, Haiti. So as you look on the computer, as everyone looks forward, do not forget this name, Yéle, Haiti, and we are looking for great partnerships and moving the Haitian race and the human race forward. And I look forward to performing for you guys later for free.
I have a long list of questions, but I know you're really going to resent me if I ask more than one or two of them, because I know you probably have better questions. So start organizing your questions, but I'd like to start with just one that I put on the table. I think Ed's comments were very optimistic and very positive about things that have happened lately, developments that have taken place that are maybe unexpected. And I think he started us off with a fair amount of optimism about what's possible when we put aside ideological blinders and work in unconventional ways. Jamie, maybe a little dose of, I don't know if it's skepticism or challenge about how much work there is ahead to build a movement in the United States that's really sustainable. And then Wyclef talked about some of the unconventional tools used to be effective in Haiti. So I think all these are interesting ingredients, and it kind of suggests to me that we're maybe at a moment in time. And I just wonder if the panelists, any of you or all of you, would like to look forward 5 years from now. And I guess I would ask, if 5 years from now we look back at all of these things that have happened recently and see it as kind of like, that was a weird, what happened then? That was a weird time. Too bad it wasn't sustained. And I think, Wyclef, from what I heard you say last night, 5 years is way too long even to be thinking about Haiti. You think the window in Haiti is much narrower in terms of success or failure in a way that would be devastating. And so I guess I'd like to ask any of you who would want to comment, if 5 years from now we look back and say, boy, that was a great opportunity, how did we squander it? What do you think will be the reasons that it wasn't sustainable? And if you want to take a more positive view about what are the things that are going to make it work, I'd love to hear that as well.
I'll have a crack at it. I'm never hesitant to express an opinion, even when I don't know what I'm talking about. But I think there is great cause for optimism. Let me just take 1 second and say why, and then I'll say what I think could cause us to squander it. First, what we've seen emerge in the last 5 years is a tremendous spirit of bipartisanship in the U.S. political structure, and also some raising of consciousness in some other countries. But if you look at people like Senators Durbin and Santorum, or Senator Helms and Jim Colby, or Senator Helms and Daschle, those kinds of partnerships. I mean, they're just unheard of in the past. When you look at the establishment of the institution like the Global Fund, which is now pushed out almost $2 billion, when you think about a president who was elected who had never left the country before becoming president, who launches an initiative like a PEPFAR and the Millennium Challenge program. When you look at a president who really didn't do a lot about development and AIDS when he was president, and now in the post-presidential period has really distinguished himself in terms of getting the focus on development and particularly adding more momentum on in the area of drugs. And then you look at what the G8 did. I think there's a lot of reasons for optimism. Now, how could we squander that? I think the way we could easily squander it is twofold. One, to lose continuity of leadership. You see a situation where PEPFAR job is now vacant and needs to be filled. There's going to be a presidential election in a couple of years, and it's not clear what the views will be of the next president. There's a number of congressional elections that are quite key, that are going to affect how the country views those issues. You have a president of France who's been quite a force in pushing development issues, who may not be the president of France for forever, and likely will not be. So you have the Global Fund. The executive director of the Global Fund is about to step down and needs to be replaced. So you have this wide range of leadership change and turmoil. And I think it's very important on all of us to make sure that one way we could squander this opportunity would be to not program that next wave of leadership in an appropriate way. The other thing is money. The idea that these programs are going to always benefit exclusively from the munificence of governments is, in my opinion, wrong-minded. Governments get what's called donor fatigue, and I think the chances they're getting it sometime soon is real. And so I think this is where President Chirac and others in Europe, I think, have been very clever about raising for people's consideration the idea of alternative, sustainable methodologies to fund development. And that's another way we could lose momentum, is if the money goes away. So that would be my answer.
Go ahead.
Just a quick thought, which is formally, the G8 made their promise to increase aid by 2010, so we need to make that promise count. It's an increase of $5 billion a year for Africa every year for the next 5 years. Globally, it's an increase of $10 billion a year every year for the next 5 years. Making sure that money is well spent, make sure it's actually delivered, that's a big challenge. I would say, however, just on the sort of the kind of the G8 promise keeping, making sort of landscape, the big thing is the Russian G8 is a bit of a, we can sidestep that one a little bit. The German G8 summit next year is crucial to mobilize people in Germany, and also I think to mobilize the G8 again around the notion of working together for big solutions, for big problems is key. So this kind of next year is extremely important, and I would repeat what I said about the One campaign. I think it's a rare opportunity to put an unlikely alliance together here in the United States that's been doing great work, at key moments in the budgetary process in Jim Nussle's district in Iowa, and down in Nashville and Tennessee, and Senate Majority Leader's state, and so on. And we need that kind of activity to be going on much more aggressively all the time.
Right, right.
And we need to be going on now.
Wyclef, you mentioned in your comments donors who've been active in Haiti giving up or pulling out, and I think you're trying to reinvigorate interest, and you've brought, again, the full range from a conventional partner like the Pan American Development Foundation to hip-hop stars who you've brought to Haiti to perform. What do you see in terms of getting them involved and wanting to do things? What are the risks of them getting burnt out also because of the difficulties there?
Real quick, I got beef with Bono. When you see him, tell him I'm not part of the One campaign, okay? I seen it. I seen the one. No, I'm not part of the One campaign. All right. I'm snapping my finger. See, I know what it's about. Real quick, with the situation in Haiti is that a lot of people, when you hear of the violence, let's be clear, Port-au-Prince, which is the capital, most of the violence comes from 3 places. One of them is called Cité Soleil. Another is called Bel Air. There's another place which is called Grand Ravine. So I think that with the donors that are giving money, that have been giving money, I think we're in a position right now in Haiti. We've just went through an election with President René Préval. And I think I could speak in behalf of President René Préval to say that education is the #1 priority in his agenda. And I think that after giving so much and being burnt out, I think this is where Yéle Haiti comes in. So you have a fresh organization, a fresh foundation that are willing to partner up and just move the country forward. When you hear about the violence of Haiti, it's sort of like Jamaica. You have Kingston, Jamaica. You can't go downtown at night. But you also know about Montego Bay, Ocho Rios. Go back to Jamaica. So there is not enough information about Haiti so that when you hear Haiti, you just hear Haiti. You don't know that there is Port-au-Prince, there is Jacmel, there is Jeremy. So what I encourage the donors and people that are giving is don't look at these 3 areas that are doing violent, but let's look at Haiti as a whole. It's virgin territory that's ready to blossom.
Right. Thank you. I'd now like to turn to you for questions. Ken, I think there's somebody with a microphone. I don't know how you're going to be able to navigate through the chairs, but Ken Bacon has a question. And I think they want me to ask people to identify themselves and from where they speak.
Ken Bacon, Refugees International. I have a question about strategies for success for the One campaign. About 10% of the American population, 30 million people, have been born in another country. And it seems to me that these groups, Pakistani Americans, Haitian Americans, Latinos, are natural constituents to work for the One campaign to bring more prosperity, better health to their countries. I wonder, what are the promises and obstacles of working with these foreign-born groups?
It's a great question. Would you like to help us answer it? Because we're a new coalition, bringing in new partners with new people and new ideas. That's a great idea. It's been talked about. We haven't done much about it. I think you might have a better answer for the question than I do. Fantastic. Right. Sorry, I can't. I mean, I could venture an answer, but I'm sure you know the answer better than I do. So let's talk about that.
Yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is Roy Wangila from the Ark Foundation of Africa, and I have 2 questions. One for the first speaker, and the other one is for the second. The first one, I'm interested in finding out how you are working with grassroots organization in case of AIDS. Because on a recent trip, I found a group of compassion, and they are caretakers, and the caretakers were complaining that they've been forced into HIV testing, and they did it in fear that funding may be cut off. And the second question is the debt relief. I was part of, when I lived in Washington, of the noise of forgive our countries. However, I'm also wondering, what are you doing with the presidents in Africa that are getting all this money and being forgiven? Are you helping them to slow down on getting these loans so that we can really look at the long-term development of our nation so that young people may be stopped from lining up at U.S. embassies or German embassy looking for visas so that we retain them in our countries. Thank you.
Can we start with Ed? Did you?
I didn't get all of that,
Yeah,
but why don't you paraphrase what the key point you...
I think the first question was how, and guess it's through your various activities, but it sounds like maybe through Compassion International you work with grassroots organizations. Was that the...
Well, I think the question was, one of the elements of the question was the testing thing, and whether, I just have to tell you, I'm a big opponent of VCT. You can all stone me if you want to, but I think it's the VCTs kill more people in Africa than anything else, and we got to stop it. It's stupid. It's an absolute catastrophe. The fact of the matter is that 95% of the people who are infected with HIV in Africa don't know it, and they're going around infecting other people. Now, why is there such a thing as VCT? Because everybody's concerned about the stigma issue, which is a big issue. But we've got to get over it. We've got to get out there and get rid of this stigma issue, but at the same time, we've got to test the populations. Now, nobody in Compassion, as far as I know, is forcing anybody to take a test. What they are doing is they're having these testing days where people come in and are encouraged to be tested. But the fact is, some other countries are being much more aggressive than that. Lesotho is going to test 100% of the population, a very meritorious initiative. And Botswana has finally given up on VCT correctly and gone to what's called opt-out testing, and they found that it's been extremely effective. And until we get past this crazy mythology that VCT is going to solve this problem, it isn't going to be solved. So I'll just answer that part of the question, and you can all come up and beat me up afterwards if you choose to, but that's where I am on the issue.
I think you hit the heart of it. Yeah, can you spell out VTC, Ed? Spell out VTC.
Oh, I'm sorry. VCT is an approach to testing for HIV infection, which stands for voluntary counseling and testing. And the theory is that people come forward, are counseled as to why they should be tested, then get tested, and it's all kept very quiet, and their dignity is protected, which I think is entirely appropriate. And it's a model that worked fairly well on the West Coast of the United States, but it's not the right model for Africa, in my view.
Jamie, would you like to take on the debt relief?
Sure. I mean, if I understood correctly, it's about how do you make sure the money isn't going to redecorate presidential palaces.
And incurring additional debt, I think.
And incurring additional debt. Well, in terms of the first point, it's a big concern. Not every country got debt cancellation. A lot didn't, because you couldn't be sure that the money would be well spent. What we need to try and get ourselves out of is the business of us making all the decisions and trying to encourage that it's actually, for example, citizens groups in Africa that are empowered to make the decisions about whether their governments are corrupt or not, and worthy as their leaders to receive, to represent governments that are going to get the relief, the money they would have been paying back in debt cancellation back into their budgets. In other words, there is a kind of a tricky question about the conditionalities around debt cancellation, which I think you were getting at, and which, I think there's still more work to be done on ensuring that we're looking at more kind of bottom-up conditionality, bottom-up accountability, and less kind of micromanaging of these countries from Washington, D.C. or Brussels. I think that was a bit of what you're getting at, and we need to do a lot more work on making sure the money is better spent, both with debt cancellation and increased aid flows. And that's why I was saying that's actually one of our big challenges, building up civil society in these countries, budgetary transparency, monitoring groups, etc. All those kinds of things need to be done. The second part of it is new loans, and actually that's why we've campaigned for 100% grants going forward from the IFIs, the international financial institutions, the multilateral development banks, so that, and actually this is the President Bush's stated policy, and it's now become policy for most countries. They're getting at 100% grants going forward, at least from IDA, the African Development Bank, and so on. So that's a very good thing, and we've campaigned for it. So we'd agree that that was potentially a problem. In terms of governments borrowing from the private sector, that's less in our gift. It is up to these governments and where they have it, parliamentary process and their budgetary processes, and we can't do much about that. We can encourage groups in these countries to do more about it.
I think we had a gentleman here, and then you come over here. Yes, sir.
Eric McCallum with Microcredit Enterprises. Are you working with the lobbying group results? And I'm just assuming you're familiar with them. And I was just curious, is that an effective relationship, or are you guys just starting to experiment with that?
Yep.
Yes, they're an excellent organization. We do work with them. I can give more detail if you want, but yes, I think they're fantastic.
Do you want to? Does either of you want to explain what results is for others?
They're a grassroots organization, especially strong in particular key legislative districts, which encourages people in these constituencies to call on their elected representatives to increase appropriations and improve policy, especially on things like user fees for health services and education services, and also microcredit. Empowering the poorest of the poor, trying to make sure that foreign assistance gets to the poorest communities, the lowest quintile of the demographic.
Great, thank you.
Is that fair?
I'm Susan Davis. I chair the Grameen Foundation USA Board and lead Ashoka's Global Academy for Social Entrepreneurship. And since this panel actually mentioned microfinance, Wyclef, you mentioned how important it is in Haiti. And the panel, the whole conference is about building alliances for policy, philanthropy, and social entrepreneurship. I wanted to ask each of you what you think the role of social entrepreneurs are in trying to make these policy changes happen, and what kinds of new alliances are possible in working on this front as you've been targeting and working with governments, or perhaps also what linkages with the business community?
Well, I haven't done a lot of that, but I very much support it. The one project, which is a Grameen spinoff that I'm very familiar with, is called Village Phone. It's a project in East Africa that, in collaboration with MTN, the cell phone company, to create these little businesses in villages where typically a woman is sold a phone on credit, and then she has a car battery or a solar panel, and then she becomes the phone company for the village, and she makes money and pays off the cost of the phone and the services. MTN gets more business, and the whole economic level of the village is lifted. It's a great project, and I think there's thousands of these projects that could be launched. And the only other comment I would make is I think that ultimately the only way Africa or the other impoverished countries of the world are going to move into the modern world and have the kind of life that their citizens want and deserve is if the level of economic activity is raised. And social entrepreneurship, I think, is a good way to do that. It's not an area I specialize in, though.
Got huge potential. Micro telcos, I saw some of that a couple of weeks ago in Rwanda. Lots of very interesting stuff going on there on that subject. I think it's something also that a new, and Ed's actually typifies this, I think there's a new set of investors and philanthropists who are getting involved who I think particularly interested in this model. And there's lots of interesting models out there. Taking things to scale, I think, is a big challenge. And that's probably something you've all talked about an awful lot in these sessions in the last few days, taking things to scale and making sure that what looks like a good idea in a particular village in a particular circumstance can work in 10,000 villages and across whole countries is the next challenge.
So the clock is ticking. I think we can only probably take two more questions, if you could.
I'm Neva Goodwin from the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. It's understandable that so much effort is going into preventing AIDS and curing it, but the reality that's left is that there's an enormous number of children who have been orphaned by the death of one or both parents of AIDS and the decimation of their village, which on that particular aspect of the problems of the modern world.
I'm not an expert on the orphan issue except to know what the numbers are, and it certainly stuns you. But I think this is another place where the faith-based organizations have shown a lot of leadership and certainly have the capacity to fill the gap in many ways. As you know, however, many of the orphans are cared for by grandmothers and grandfathers because the intervening generation has died, and sometimes it's uncles and aunts as well. And so it seems to me that one of the ways in which, building a network of orphanages throughout Africa to house 10 million kids is just not practical. So I think we have to think about some way to empower and assist the surrogate parents who are filling in the gap, and I think the faith-based organizations are doing some of that, and I don't know how much the governments are doing, but it's certainly something that needs to be done.
Well, I know we're all in trouble for running over, but I'm going to take one last question in the back. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm Dave Magnani from Massachusetts at Action Associates. I have a question for Jamie, and you raised the point very well, and I think they're going to talk about it more in the next session about advocacy, but you pointed out, I think very well, that legislators in particular who need to pay attention to these issues often are not rewarded for doing so in their own districts because their issues tend to be more oriented around domestic issues, and it's difficult for them to take political risks on behalf of issues like this for which they may not get a lot of support in their districts. Is there a list or a group of legislators on either side of the aisle that we could celebrate, assist, provide support for, so that they would feel that they were not voices acting in the wilderness in Congress on issues that we care about?
I think that's a splendid idea. I think congressmen like to be lauded. It's something we do informally on quite a regular basis, but I think really praising those who have stepped forward and are champions is something we need to do a lot more of. We need to cultivate those champions and nurture them, and we need to encourage new ones as each generation of congressmen and women, move on. So I think it's a great idea. I think it's a great idea. It's something that one tries to be very positive about these things. Politicians usually get criticized. They very rarely get any credit, whether that's President Bush for working on AIDS, or Senator Santorum for his amazing work on the Global Fund for AIDS, TB, malaria. So I think that's an extremely important point, and it always needs to be seen to be fair. And I think we should do a lot more about it. It's a big idea, that, actually, to implement that properly, and could do a lot of good.
Time is up, and I wonder if everybody would join me to thank these terrific panelists for their insights. Uh, I have been asked to make a few announcements on behalf of the greater cause, and let me say the first one is there will be a lot of information. I think there's a resource list attached to www.philanthropyforum.org, and I would urge you to go there. I'm hoping you could find information about Yéle.org.
Yéle.org.
Yeah. Yele.org. Yes. Data.org, one.org, probably CGD.org. I don't know, Ed. And lots of other very important resources if you want to sort of find out more in this area, and maybe you can grab one of our panelists as they're having coffee. And that's the next thing. You can have until 10 o'clock, I guess, to have coffee before the next round, the final round of breakout sessions takes place. I've also been asked to remind you there are performance evaluations in your conference packets, and drop them off at the registration desk. And then finally, the keynote address, which I guess is the prelude to the Wyclef Jean performance. I'm sorry. The keynote address by President Clinton, it will be in, I guess, this room, and you're expected at 11:15 and be seated promptly at 11:15. So those are all the announcements I think I was expected to make. And bring your badge for the 11:15 panel. Yeah, thanks.